guys, it's Lauren from Girly Knits, and today I am going to do my very first machine knitting tutorial, which I'm super excited about. I'm going to be walking you through step by step on how to make, sorry, I have my assistant here, Ezzy, on how to make this adorable little bra top. Once you get this down, you can make this bra top in literally 2 hours. It's so amazing. This is why I love my knitting machine so much. You can make things so fast. Like you can make dresses and pants and shorts and skirts, like all these things in a day, which is so much fun. I'm going to be showing you how to make it on my LK150, which is a mid-gauge flatbed knitting machine. You can use other knitting machines, of course, and follow along as well. The gauge I am working with is using a worsted weight yarn at the T5, and we're getting a gauge of 4.75 stitches per inch and 7.25 rows per inch. So as long as you get that gauge, you should be able to follow along, and of course you can, make your own adjustments and things like that. But I'm going to be walking you through a bunch of awesome things that you can do with your LK150. I really wanted to create something that really shows you like all the different things you can do with your knitting machine, and you get this really adorable top out of it. If you want the pattern for this top, which has a huge range of sizes, and it has really written out step-by-step instructions with lots of up-close photos, really designed for the beginner, you can find that pattern on Ravelry and also at girlyknits.com. That's going to give you a lot of information for making this top custom for you based off your bust measurement and your cup size and other measurements you can take to really make it work for you and fit you. I'm going to be showing knitting the size 2 in the pattern, which is for a 35-inch bust. I'm making this for myself, so you can follow along with that. I'll be walking you through so you could just do it with me, or you can get the pattern and get your own size and follow along as well. So the techniques we're going to cover today are, the first thing is how to do mock ribbing. So the LK150 does not have a ribbing attachment. So in order to do ribbing, you either have to do it by hand on the machine, or you could knit the ribbing by hand on needles and then transfer it to the machine, or you can do this, which goes super fast. And so it's not actual ribbing, but it looks like ribbing. It's very stretchy, and it looks like you have those purl ridges, but they're actually skip stitches, which I'm going to show you. And then you just fold the hem and join it, and it's just like super fast, and it makes a great finish. And then we are going to move on to the body of the bra top, where I'm going to show you how to be doing increases, and then I'm going to show you how to knit the 2 different sides of the cup one at a time. So there we're going to be putting half of the bra top on hold, and that's it can be a little intimidating at first, but it's a really great technique to learn. It's what you use, if you're doing like a neckline of a sweater, and you're gonna come across it a lot. So it's a great thing to get comfortable with. So we're gonna knit one side at a time and do these decreases along the edges that make this beautiful finish where you don't have to do any extra finishing. And then last, we're going to do these I-cord straps, and I-cord is a super fun thing to do on the knitting machine. It just goes so fast. You can make these straps in minutes. It's a blast. So we're going to be doing that, and then I'm going to be showing you how to work the other side, and then once we finish both sides, we're going to seam it together, and then I'll walk you through the finishing, and you're gonna come out with this adorable bra top. Another design that is very similar to this is the dress that I'm wearing here, which has, the same techniques for the neckline, and the bottom ribbing is also the same. The only difference is it's longer, and it has, obviously some more shaping through the hips and the waist and the bust. But other than that, you can use this tutorial to knit this dress as well, and we're gonna be covering all those techniques. So what you wanna do to get started is you wanna thread up some waist yarn, and the yarn that you'll be using to knit this bra top. As I mentioned, I'm using a worsted weight yarn. I'm using Lion Brand's Pound of Love, which is great because it comes in these like over 1,000 yard skeins, and so it's just nice when you're machine knitting to like not have to like constantly be attaching new skeins. But of course, any yarn that you have where you can get the gauge will be perfectly fine for this top as well. So let's get going. So to get started, we are going to be casting on for our mock ribbing. For mock ribbing, we're going to be knitting every other needle. And so to do the initial cast on, we're gonna cast on with waist yarn, and we're actually going to select every 4th needle just for that very first row. So I'm going to be casting on, following the pattern, 33 stitches on the left and 32 stitches on the right. So I'm just going to start with the selector tool at 32, and then we're just going to continue selecting every 4th needle until I get to 33. So there's 33, and just make sure that adds up. And then we are going to thread the waist yarn, and we're going to have a tension of 3.5. And just in case your carriage isn't set at the standard settings, both of your levers are going to be at 2 towards the bottom, and then the upper levers are going to be on the triangle. So just make sure that's right. You got T 3.5. You're going to put your waist yarn in, and then we're just going to run it across. Okay, so now we are going to hang our cast on comb. I've seen people use this different ways. I actually like the claws to be facing towards the machine, though some people have it the other way. It's whatever your preference is. When you connect them, we're just gonna center that at 0 and then hang it. So making sure you get all of those loops. And then I like to put this tail right here. You know, some people use like clothespins. I actually like to use this little notch right here on the edge of the cast on comb to secure that. So that is good to go. And then now we're going to fill in every other needle between the first and last stitches that we cast on. So we can just use this tool, which selects every other needle. And we're just gonna bring those to B position. So you just want to make sure that every other needle is selected for the amount of stitches you're casting on. And now we are going to run our carriage across again. So that is our cast on, and now every other needle should be in work at this point. So we are just going to do, you know, like an inch or two just to get things running, make sure all the needles are working correctly. A waist yarn is just a great time to make sure that everything's working properly. So we're just gonna do about 9 to 10 rows, and then we're gonna end with our carriage on the left. And we don't have to keep track of them. We're just gonna go ahead. Okay, so to me that looks good. I'm just looking at it, seeing that everything looks right. And then at this point, I'm going to switch to my Ravel cord. You don't have to use Ravel cord. I found it a little fussy when I first started using it. It just makes it easier to remove the waist yarn because it's very slippery. So it's something that you just use for one row, and then later we remove it to remove the waist yarn. But when I learned machine knitting, we just used waist yarn, and then we would cut the waist yarn, and I can show you that as well, and then remove it that way. So it's really whatever your preference is, but if you'd like to use Ravel cord, you just want to end with the carriage on the left before you go to the right, just before you're going to start knitting for that very last row. So I'm just going to, I like taking the waist yarn out. I'm just going to de-thread it so it doesn't get in the way. I mean, you could put it off to the side on your notch over here. I just, we're not going to be using it again, so I'm just going to get it out of the way. Or you could cut it. I like reusing my waist yarn. I don't actually throw it away. I reuse it constantly. So we're gonna get the Ravel cord. You just wanna make sure it's long enough to knit one row. And then, so we're gonna thread that in, and you just kind of have to hold it and then guide it along. Okay, if you have never done this before, you might wanna try it on a swatch before you do it, because I had some trouble with it the first time. Okay, so there is that, and then I'm just gonna take my Ravel cord and my waist yarn over here and just secure that. So we are going to join our main color, and we are going to leave 18 inches as a tail, because we're gonna use this later when we seam up the bra top. So got my 18 inches, and then when we're keeping the tension, 3.5, and then we're just gonna thread this guy. Okay, and then we're ready to knit our first row. So we are going to change our row counter to 0 so we can start counting rows now. And then let's just go ahead and work that first row. Okay, awesome. And then again, I'm just gonna like latch this here. And at this point we can get our claw weights out to put on the sides. We are just going to knit 60 rows. This is the fun part. It's gonna go super fast, and we're gonna have our mock ribbing in no time. So let's get going. And just as an aside, this is for about a 3.5 inch band on the bottom of the bra, but if you want it shorter or longer, you can of course adjust the amount, but we're gonna do 60 rows. All right, so we've just hit 60 rows. One thing I didn't mention before is that my dial threading the yarn up here, I have it at 7. Something people run into sometimes, if that tension isn't right, sometimes the yarn comes out too tightly or too loosely. So if you're having issues, make sure it's threaded in there and that it's an appropriate tension for your yarn. But I think 7 is good for a worsted weight yarn. So now that we've knit our 60 rows, we are ready to join the hem. So we're going to remove all of our weights. And I won't be using the cast on comb anymore, so we can put that away. And then we're going to grab our single prong transfer tool. And now we're going to be folding and joining the hem. So in order to do that, you're going to find the very first row of the main color of your knitting. And you're going to see there's that first little purl ridge there right after the Ravel cord. Or the waist yarn, whatever way you're doing it. And we're just gonna grab that with our needle, and then we're going to put it on the first needle next to the very first needle that's selected. So we're basically going to be using these stitches to fill in all the stitches between the first and last needles that were cast on, and it's actually gonna work out perfectly. So I'm gonna go ahead and then this next needle. So we're basically putting these on every other needle to fill in so that every needle will be in work once we join. And just as like a fun little tip, if this is for mock ribbing, but you can also do this folded hem for like a regular knit hem. So for example, if you were working every needle and then you wanted to fold and join the hem so you had that nice clean edge, you'd be basically doing this, but you would be putting these purl ridges on all of the needles so that there would be 2 stitches on every needle, and then it would be the same in that you would just join it with the next row that you knit. So yeah, you can do it both ways. This is kind of nice, it's less bulky when you're knitting across, but of course I've done some designs where you want just like a knit hem. So as you approach the edge, you should have the amount of stitches work out to be exactly the amount that you need to fill in. If for any reason you don't, you have more or fewer, you probably missed one or did something funny, so you might just want to undo it and see what you missed, but that should work out. So the next thing we're going to do is join our knitting, and to do that we're going to want to push our knitting back, and then you can grab the flat side of this selecting tool, and then we're just going to move all the needles to D position. And I just learned that this is helpful whenever you're joining a hem. It's just, it helps the carriage move along if you have them in D position, and it's just going to make the next row go smoother. So you got your work back, your needles forward, and then we are going to change to T5, and now we are ready to join. And we're also going to reset the counter to 0. Okay, so now we're going to knit across this row. It can be a little fussy, so just be patient, go slowly. And now we just want to double check that every needle is in work now. Sometimes they can drop when you do this row, so just double check. At this point we can hang our weights again. And we're not going to remove the waist yarn just yet. We'll do that after we knit a little bit more of the bra top. Okay, so on this very first row, we are going to decrease at the left edge so that we will now have an equal amount of stitches on both sides. The reason there's an extra stitch here is it just made it easier when I was doing the mock ribbing, so it was every other stitch, but now we just want to decrease that so that we have an even number of stitches on both sides. In this case, we have 32 on both sides. And so I'm just going to do a decrease. It doesn't matter if you use the 2-prong or the 3-prong transfer tool. I'm using the 2-prong here, but I've used either. And then we're just going to transfer those edge 2 stitches on the left edge over 1 to decrease 1. And then we're going to take that last needle, make sure it's out of work, and then we're just going to work this next row And now we are good to go. So at this point, we are just knitting the body of the bra top, and we're gonna do our first increase on row 8. So we're just going to knit up to row 8, and then I'll show you the increase there. So now we're at row 8. You can use either a 1 prong or the 2 prong to do your increase. It depends on your preference. I'm going to use the 2 prong transfer tool today. I just noticed when I seam the bra top, it just makes it like a little bit easier, but either way is fine. I've done both. It's maybe a little less visible if it's closer to the edge, but in this case, I'm just gonna use my 2 prong transfer tool. We're gonna transfer those 2 last stitches on the right side over. And then we're going to use our 1 prong transfer tool to grab that purl ridge, that 3rd needle, and then we're just gonna hang it on the needle that's empty. And you don't have to do this, but something I like to do when I'm doing increases and decreases is I like to move the needles that I just transformed out to D position, just so like I can see that I did it. Like I'm like, did I do it on that side or not? It just helps me, and also like I feel like it makes it a little easier when I'm bringing the carriage across to work those manipulated stitches. So then on this other side, on the left side, we're going to grab 2, gonna transfer them over. And then we're going to use our 1 prong transfer tool and transfer that purl ridge into that empty needle. And then I'm just gonna pull that out, like I said, not necessary, but I like to do it. And then we're just going to knit to the next increase row, which is 16. So we're increasing on rows 8, 16, and 24. And aside from that, we're just knitting back and forth aside from those increases. All right, so after our 3rd increase row, we are going to have a total of 70 stitches, 35 on each side. So at this point, I'm just going to keep knitting until I have the amount of rows that I want. In general, you know, fewer rows for like a smaller bust, add more rows if you have a larger bust. It's just gonna offer more coverage, and then, you know, depending on how plunging you want it to be or how much coverage you would like, this is totally customizable. For this bra top, I am going to be knitting to row 32 as I have a fuller bust, and so I wanna make sure it fits correctly. Yeah, you could do anywhere from like 26 to 32 or even more if you wanted. It's totally customizable. So we're just gonna knit up to that point of the length that we want at the side of our bra top. All right, so at this point we can go ahead and remove our waste yarn. And if you didn't use a Ravel cord, something you can do is you can just snip this very last stitch right here at the corner, and then on the other side you can pull it through, and that would remove the waste yarn. But since we have this handy Ravel cord, we're just gonna grab it from the right and then just pull it out. It should come out pretty smoothly. And then yay, it just comes off like that, which is awesome. So we can put our Ravel cord away. And then this waste yarn I had, I can just easily wind it back up into a ball that we can reuse again later. We are going to reset our row counter to 0, and then we're gonna work a decrease row where we're decreasing on the right and the left sides, and we're gonna use our 3-prong transfer tool. And the reason we're using the 3-prong transfer tool is because that's gonna create a really pretty edge. I tried 2-prong and 3-prong, and the 3-prong just gives this nice little curled edge that just looks nice and finished. So make sure to use your 3-prong when you're decreasing. First, we're gonna reset our counter to 0, and then going to do a decrease on the left over here. On the right, sorry. I know left and right. And then a decrease on the left. Okay, and then from there we're just gonna work 2 rows. So now we are ready to start our right cup, and then we're gonna have the left cup in hold. And also you just wanna make sure your stitch count is accurate. For the size 2, we have 34 stitches on each side, and I'm just double checking that's correct. Okay, so to work part of your knitting, so we're gonna be working this half and not this half, what we wanna do is we want to change our rustle levers, is what they're called, on our carriage. Right now they're at 2 and we wanna change them both to 1. So we're just gonna flip both of those up, make sure both of them are up. And when that happens, the carriage will not knit any needles that are in D position, which is this, the most forward position. And it will only knit stitches that are in C or B position. And so what we're gonna do is, now that we have that setting, we're gonna go ahead and move all of the left cup to move all these needles into D position. And then you can just hold your knitting while you're doing that so the stitches don't come off. And then we are ready to work the right cup. Every even row, we're gonna be decreasing at both the underarm and the neckline, and then every odd row when the carriage is on the left, we're only gonna be decreasing at the neckline. I find this is the magic formula for your straps hitting your bra, aligned with your bra where it's supposed to be. Going to set up our first decreased row. So I'm gonna grab my 3-prong transfer tool. Again, we wanna use a 3-prong for decreases on both edges. And I'm just gonna grab 3 stitches here, transfer them over. And then something to note here is, I know I said when I'm doing increases and decreases, I like having the needles out in D position, but we can't do that because if we do that, then the carriage will not knit them. So we wanna make sure to push them back after we do the decrease to C position. And then make sure that this stitch right here, where we just did this decrease, that we're taking this out of work, because we don't want to knit that stitch. And then again, we're going to come over here and do our decrease. Make sure that's in C position. And then we are ready to knit. And also I'm just gonna move my weights over here. They don't really totally matter here, but I just do it anyway. You're gonna see it's kind of tight, but we're just gonna go ahead and knit that row. And then now we're on row 3, where we're only gonna decrease at the neckline. So we're going to use our 3-prong, do a decrease here. As I said, it's a little tight, so it's like a little tricky, but you'll get the hang of it. That, and then take this needle out of work. And then as you'll see, when you slide over these needles in D position, nothing happens. It's not going to knit them. The yarn's just gonna kind of carry over. So those are safe, they're not gonna get knitted, and then so we're just gonna go back. All right, so now we're on an even row, so we're going to decrease at the neckline as well as the underarm. Take that out of work. Then again, we're gonna just decrease the underarm, or the neckline. And we're gonna do both. So as you can see, the neckline's starting to form there. So we're just going to continue decreasing in this manner until we get the amount of strap stitches that we want, and that can be custom to you. I personally like 7 because I find that that does a good job of covering my bra strap. It's like thin enough that it looks cute and thick enough that it covers it. So I don't have to worry about that, but of course if you're not wearing a bra, you might not care as much. Or if you have a thicker bra strap, you might want to make the strap thicker. It's really up to you, you can experiment, but we're basically just going to keep doing this until we have the amount of strap stitches that we need left, which are indicated in the pattern, but for for this bra, I'm gonna do 7. So right now I have 8 stitches left. I'm just gonna work this last neckline decrease. Now we have 7. Awesome. So we just finished our right cup right here. Looks good. And now we are ready to knit the straps in I-cord, which is super fun. So to knit in I-cord, we are now going to touch the upper levers. Right now they're both on the triangle, and we're gonna move the left one to the circle. Just on the left side, we're gonna pull that down, and we're still gonna keep rustle levers on one because we still want these in holding. We don't want them to knit. So, and Ezzy is joining us again. Hi, Ezzy. So we're gonna knit across. Oh, and before that, we do want to change the tension to 3.5 again. I just find the straps are just a little more put together when they're at a smaller tension. Ezzy's risking it all, but she's gonna stand on the machine while we knit. We'll see what happens. Okay, so we're just gonna go across. And see how that just, it just pulled the yarn across. It actually didn't knit the stitches. And then on the way back, it knits them. Kind of like when you're knitting I-cord, how you're kind of doing like a circle by just not knitting that row and just always knitting one row. So if it's on this side, it'll skip the stitches this way. If it's on this side, it'll skip the stitches that way. It doesn't really matter because if you do either one, it's gonna knit an I-cord, which is what we want. So now we're just gonna go back and forth. As you can see, it's just knitting an I-cord, super easy, there's no trick to it. You can just hang one weight at this point. You don't even really need that anymore. So we're just gonna continue. I have just knit about 80 rows. You're gonna get about 10 stitches per row at this dial setting for these straps. So 80 rows is about 8 inches, which I have found works well for me. Of course, if you aren't sure how long to make your strap, you can always make it a little bit longer, and then you can adjust it later. You can, take it off. It's not until you put the bra top on that you'll really truly be able to tell what the perfect strap length is. So you can just kind of estimate. You could reference a top you have if that's helpful. I just know from doing this multiple times that 8 inches is my key number. So now that we have got that settled, I'm going to just transfer these stitches to a holder. All right, and then to transfer them to a holder, or if you're ever transferring your machine knitting to like a knitting needle or a circular needle or anything like that, I find it helpful if you want the stitches in the right position, you just want to grab them from the back to the front. So I'm just gonna go from the back to the front and then slip it off. All right, so we got that, and then we're just going to break the yarn. I would suggest about 10 inches. You want to leave enough for Kitchener stitch to attach this to the back when we get to that point. So now we can just move these needles out of work and then put our yarn here. And now we are ready to knit the left side. So before we start, we're going to put our carriage back into the original setting. So we're gonna move this left guy back up to the triangle, and then we're gonna move both of these guys back to 2 because we don't need anything in holding anymore. And then we are ready to work the left side. But before we do that, we're gonna change this counter back to what it was before we separated our top, and that was at row 2. So I've changed this to 002. And then our first row is going to be a decrease row. So we're gonna set up for that before we join our yarn. And then one more thing is we wanna change our tension back to 5 because it was at 3.5. And then we're gonna grab our 3-prong transfer tool. And since this is an even row, we're gonna be decreasing at the underarm and the neckline. And it can be a little tricky since these were in D position to do the decrease. So you just gotta be careful, but we'll be fine. So you just want to, you can just pull this guy up. You might have to open the latch manually. It will get easier after this row. Okay, so now we got our decreases on both sides. We're going to rehang our weights. And then we're going to join our yarn back up. So we're just going to put the yarn in the carriage, and then you can just leave, I don't know, about 5 inches or so that we can weave in later. And then we're gonna move across that row. Awesome. Okay, so now we're on an odd row, so we're just gonna decrease at the neckline using our 3-prong tool. Now an even row, we're gonna do neckline and underarm. And now we can go back to the way I like to do my decreases, having them in D position, because now that our carriage settings are back to normal, it's fine. Because we don't have anything in holding anymore. And yeah, we're just gonna continue like this. And one thing I didn't mention before is after you knit that first strap, it could be helpful to check your row count number so that you can make sure that this strap is the same amount of rows. It's not a huge deal, but it's just helpful. I noticed my counter, I ended at row 20 after the shaping, and then I worked the strap until row 100, so I remember that. So when I do this strap, I'll also go to 100. All right, so we're at our last decrease row. But now we're back to 7 stitches. So now again, we're just going to work in I-cord. You might notice that your strap is sort of far from your counter, so you just need to make sure that you're engaging the counter on each row if you want to match the number of rows for your strap. If you don't care and you just want to measure it with a ruler, that's fine too. Or you could always count your stitches later to make sure they're even. Another option, of course, is you could remove these stitches and then put them over here closer to the counter. I'm just going to show you how to do it and where I'm making sure to engage the counter every row, but you can do whatever works for you. So again, we're going to go down to tension 3.5, and then we're gonna move this lever over to the circle, and then we're going to go ahead and knit an I-cord. Okay, so we just hit 100. Then again, we're going to use our holder. I'm going to transfer these guys off the machine. And then again, we are just going to leave about 10 inches. And there it is. Okay, so we have our front of our bra top. It's gonna look something like this. Yay! I hope yours turned out great. And basically for the back, what we're gonna do is it's actually worked exactly the same. The only difference is that when we get to the straps, instead of knitting an I-cord, because we've already done our entire strap on the front, we're just actually going to stop when we hit 7 stitches or whatever the amount of strap stitches we choose. From there, we're just going to remove the stitches onto a holder as we did when we ended the strap. If you want to go back and rewatch to start from the beginning, that's, we're going to be knitting exactly the same up until that point. So I will catch up with you when we're ready to remove our back from the machine. All right, so at this point I've just finished the back As you can see, I put our right side on a holder. I've just did my last decrease, got to 7 stitches on my left side. I'm gonna remove my weights and then transfer these guys to a holder as well. And what we're gonna do next is we're gonna seam the bralette together. Then you can try it on and it'll just be easier for you to make sure the straps are the right length, and then at that point you can seam the straps, and I will show you how to do that too. You don't really need to leave too much here, just enough to weave in, because we're gonna be using our other tail to do our Kitchener stitch. Okay, so we've got our back, got our front, and now we are going to seam it together. So when you're seaming the front to the back, you want to put the right sides together, because we're going to start the seaming at the inside of the bralette where the mock ribbing starts, and then we're going to work our way to the outside. So we have our right sides together, and then we have the tail that we left. Then you're just going to thread your tapestry needle. On the inside, you just want to find that very first stitch, and you just want to leave that one selvage column there. So you're going to grab these two guys, and we're going to find the first, the other side, and then we're just going to do mattress stitch all the way around, grabbing 2 bars on the right, 2 bars on the left. And in case you're wondering why I have a band-aid on, this is embarrassing, but I actually hurt myself today when I was doing the I-cord straps. I got gouged with a needle, or I've edited that out because I doubt you would want to see it. There was like blood involved. I think when I was rewatching it back, I was like, oh my God, this is terrifying. But yeah, be careful with your knitting machine, because you know, it has a lot of sharp, pointy things. So this thing too, it sometimes like hits me in the face, so be careful. Alright, so as I reached the bottom of my bra top, I flipped it back out so the right side's facing and just seamed all along up this edge, and then I ended when I saw the first decrease row that we did. So once I hit that decrease row, I'm just gonna bring my tail back through here. And we're gonna turn this to the inside. And what I like to do is secure the yarn. So I'll just do a little knot. And then I'm just gonna weave it into this seam. That will look nice. And then, so we're just gonna seam the other side up just the same, and then I will show you how to do Kitchener stitch for the straps. So I've just finished seaming both sides of my top. It's looking good. And now we're ready to seam the straps. So what I'm going to do is I have some double pointed needles here, which are helpful. Another option you could do in place of stitch holders is if you had like a long circular needle, you could also put both sides on one circular needle and one, like the back on a separate circular needle, and then they're ready for Kitchener stitch. But since I had these guys on holders, I'm just going to put them on DPN so it'll be easier to do this. And if you've done Kitchener stitch before, then you're good, but just in case you haven't, I wanted to include this so that you have every step that you need. So using that tail, we're gonna thread our tapestry needle. And then when you put your strap next to your back stitches, just make sure that your strap isn't twisted. And then, so you just want these facing each other, and then you're starting with the tail in the back that's attached to the strap. And then with our tapestry needle, we're going to go through our front needle as if to purl, and we're gonna pull it through. And then on our back needle, we're gonna take our tapestry needle, insert it from the front to back, and again leave it on the needle and then pull our yarn through. And then our next stitch, that's a preparation, those two first stitches. And now we're going to go in the front first stitch from front to back, as if to knit, and we're going to take it off the needle, and then as if to purl through the second stitch, and then as if to purl on the back, the second needle and off, and as if to knit through the second, and then we're going to leave that on. So as if to knit, take it off, as if to purl, leave it on, as if to purl, take it off, as if to knit, leave it on. In case you don't know what that means, as if to knit is from going down through the bottom, from front to back. As if to purl is going from back to front. And then as if to purl, back to front and off, as if to knit, front to back, leave it on. So we're just going to keep doing that until we get to the end. As if to knit, as if to purl, leave it on, as if to purl, take it off, as if to knit, leave it on. All right, and then when we get to those very last two stitches, we're just gonna go as if to knit and pull it off, as if to purl and pull it through. Ideally, our tension looks okay. If not, we can adjust some stitches. And then we turn it around. We've got these two stitches here, so I like to tie them in a knot and then weave them into the side and down the side seam. So yeah, we just have to do our other strap, and then the only other finishing you'll have is these two tails where we joined our yarn at the center when we knit the second cup. And for that, I just like to weave it in through the front just to kind of tidy those stitches up a little bit, tighten them up a little bit, and then up the front, kind of hidden in our decreases. I like to weave in through every other purl ridge along those decreases, and then so it just ends right here. And I found that it looks good because then you don't really see any ends poking out. And then you will have your finished bra top. Congratulations! And if you do make it, please post a photo on Ravelry, or you can post on Instagram, tag me at Girly Knits. I would love to see what you create. And if you like this tutorial, let me know. I would love to make more and would love your feedback.